Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday series. I am Violet de Ayala, the founder of FemCity, and you're joining me today for a lovely conversation about self-love, which is our theme for the month of February. I have invited 3 of our FemCity global experts to join me in this conversation. If you're joining us live, feel free to ask questions, add some love, add some aha moments. If you're watching the replay, you can still do all of the above as well. You can always also reach out to any of us if you have any questions, or if you want to share your success. We'd love to cheer you on as well. So we're going to get started in alphabetical order. So again, our conversation today is all about words and the connection to higher self-love. And, just to kind of preface why we chose self-love, I always tell people I can share all the ways to be very successful in business and how to make a lot of money doing what you love. But if your self-love isn't in check, sometimes you will encounter blocks over and over again. So it doesn't matter what I teach you. It doesn't matter how many books you read, how many coaches you hire. That self-love really has to be there, because if not, you start talking about you don't deserve good things. You don't deserve to make money. Who do you think you are? And you will self-sabotage as well. So that's where that connection between self-love and business really are connected. And so today I want to, along with our team here, we want to make sure that you have everything you need in order to change the words so that you can increase your self-love to be a higher vibration, and to then also open up to new opportunities, which then brings you wealth and all that stuff. So anyway, let's get started with Emila Donatoro. She's an intuitive life coach. And Emila, I wanted to ask you, the first question is, why do words matter when it comes to higher self-love? I kind of just talked a little bit about that, but can you bring in a little bit more warmth to that?
Absolutely. I think words matter because words can be used violently and they can also be used non-violently. Yeah. Right. And in the spiritual practice I follow, yoga and Ayurveda meditation, there's a word called satyagraha, which means nonviolence. And Gandhi was a big follower of nonviolence. And how we talk to ourselves determines how we feel about ourselves. So if we're talking to ourselves in a violent manner, with a lot of judgment, with a lot of shame bubbling up or things like that, we're not going to feel great about ourselves, and we'll keep coming up against those barriers that you talked about. I'm not worthy. I can't do it. Whatever that looks like for any particular person. I can't hear my guidance. I don't know how. I mean, I do intuitive coaching, helping people listen to their guidance. And if somebody really believes they can't hear their guidance, like that's a form of violence against ourselves. Right. And so that's the piece, I think, that if we can work on how we talk to ourselves, how we treat ourselves in a nonviolent way, our self-love will increase over time. Right. Because we are tending to ourselves with care. And I think that's a big piece. And we aren't really taught that necessarily as kids. Right. Some of us, myself included, had to learn that as an adult. I didn't even know what I was saying was violent to myself. So we'll talk about that in another question. But this is it's a really big piece. That's why I think we can't get in touch with our higher goals, our higher selves, without having a way of communicating with ourselves that's compassionate and caring.
Yeah. And, I posted yesterday about my own self-love journey and how I discovered it way into my adult years. Like I wish I knew about self-love when I was younger. I definitely would have been in better situations and chosen things differently for sure. But, I didn't realize all the conversations that were going on in my head were just so harmful, and really made it so that not only did I choose the wrong options in life, kind of on my path, but it kept me from just really achieving great opportunities, because you self-sabotage along the way. When you don't believe that you're deserving, when you don't believe you're worthy, when you start spiraling into a conversation in your mind of just saying harsh things, like you were saying, it really keeps us down. It makes it so we don't move forward. And then it gets more like louder and louder. I feel like it just kind of expands more and more.
Absolutely. When we tell ourselves we're stupid, we start to believe it. Or we start to believe it because somebody else has told us that, and we perpetuate it in our own minds. And we just rub up against that over and over, and we sabotage ourselves. So yeah, I think words matter, how we talk to ourselves and how we talk to others.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's go to Nicole. Nicole is also one of our FemCity Global members and experts. She's a licensed social worker and also a therapist and coach. So, Nicole, I'm going to ask you, well, you can expand a little bit if you want to on what Emma was saying, but I was going to ask you, what are some ways that we can change the words just to get our minds elevated to higher levels of self-love? Because I think that's the other thing is that, yeah, okay, so now we know we got to make the changes, but like, how do we even start? What are some of the ways that you feel we can start making that change?
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of expansion and then getting to the nitty gritty of this one. One way I like to think about it is remembering that there's no bad parts of us. Even the parts that are kind of self-critical, they're trying to keep us safe. There's something in us that was like, don't do that. That's not safe. And so it's loud and kind of mean because it wants to keep us safe. And so just really, really remembering that we don't have bad parts. We just have some parts that may be more dominant depending on what you're feeling at the moment. Like if you're in a situation and you're not feeling necessarily safe, that voice is going to be the dominant voice. And so if you get more in tuned with that understanding, you can talk back to that voice and say, "Oh, thank you for showing up. I hear you. I'm safe. Let's see what the rest of the crew has to say." Because we have different versions of ourselves that's always having conversations. I know people hate to say it's like, no, that doesn't mean you're crazy. We all have different versions of ourselves that's talking all the time. It's just we don't give all of them the dominance. We don't give them the floor. And so we don't always hear it loud and clear. But if we have this understanding that there's multiple parts of us that's always having the conversation in our head, we can slow down a little bit and say, like, okay, I hear this one that's trying to keep me safe. Let's hear from everyone else. Okay, what do I really want to do here? Now that I know I'm safe, where do I want to go? Where am I being led? Outside of fear. If my gut said jump, where am I jumping to? Is this really going to make my soul leap? And so it's just really having the conversation, not being afraid to have the conversation with yourself and say, I hear you. Yes, this can be scary. But I looked around, I checked the boxes. We're safe to proceed. Now let's let everyone else talk. And sometimes a good tool, like a tangible tool, is journaling. And this doesn't have to be the formal, get your cute notebook. This could be a piece of scratch paper, a post-it paper. Just start jotting. If you feel like you're overwhelmed, just start writing whatever comes up. And eventually you'll get the nervous energy out, the nervous thoughts out, and you will start to hear the other voices come through. And so then he's like, okay, that was just fear talking. That was just fight or flight talking. This is where I really want to go. And so just write, get the energy out, right? Do some jumping jacks. So do the physical movement to get the energy out. Walking can also be good if you don't like jumping jacks. So sometimes if like all the other things are going crazy, you're just like, I can't silence it. I can't talk back to myself. Just do it. If you can't get outside, because I'm in Chicago, it was kind of cold. So you may not want to go outside and walk, but just get up, change your physical environment. Like I'm in my little corner office right now. I'll get up and walk to the front and then come back. And it's like, okay, I can hear other voices now. We're good.
I love that you added grace, to the conversation, like because we all have it. I mean, I've posted a video of Jennifer Lopez from many years ago saying also like sometimes she has these doubts, and you know what I mean? Like we see these super successful women, they still have these conversations. Like it's still part because you get a trigger that goes on all of a sudden, like, you have or someone will say something like, oh, you're so stupid, or you're so dumb, or you're so ugly. And it kind of puts a little thing in your mind. and then it spirals, and then you have these conversations, and all of a sudden it gets really bad, and you start feeling bad, and just ugh. So I think it happens to all humans, every single human, no matter how successful you are. Sometimes they're louder, sometimes they're softer, but I love how you share that there are no bad parts of who we are. They're just parts that are looking to make sure we're okay. I love that, reframing that conversation so that we're giving ourselves grace and going, it's okay that I'm having these thoughts. It's totally fine. There's a reason why I'm having that. Let me dive a little bit deeper, and let me check with those other pieces also to see who else has other feedback or comments that might elevate me to move or not move into certain directions. So I think that compassion piece is so important when you start changing your self-love, rather changing the words that you're sharing so that you can be in a higher state of self-love. I think that's so important, to give yourself grace and love, because you don't need to have any more punishment. You've already punished yourself enough, where I think most humans will go into like, oh gosh, now I'm going to punish myself even more because I've been feeling like this for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or an hour. So,
and the more, just one little thing, the more we get in tune to listening to that, you will start to realize certain spaces aren't for you. Because if you always activate it and that safety voice is dominant, you may not be in a space that's for you. Like you may be fighting something and you're not even supposed to be there. Maybe corporate world isn't for you. If every time you walk into the office, you're about to have a panic attack, maybe you're not supposed to be there and you're fighting yourself from where you're actually supposed to be.
That's interesting. Yeah. So recognizing when you're hearing those self-limiting thoughts, those negative conversations internally, and looking to see what's around you to see what's triggered it. Because it could also be not just a word that someone said, but it could be your environment.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Excellent. All right. So we had some love that came through. Just want to share it. I was a guest speaker at an event hosting by a Toronto FemCity member, and it was about busy saboteurs. So many guests said how comforting it was to hear from all of us that we're going through something similar. We're not alone in this. And again, I think, misery likes company, that saying. But, once you know that someone else has that, like, you're like, oh, okay, well then I'm totally normal. Like I read that book recently. I'm Glad My Mother Died, the one that was written by the iCarly actress. So I read that, and her story is a little bit like mine. And so I was like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Like it made me feel more human, because I was like, I wasn't the only one. Of course I'm not the only one, but you think like you're the only one going through those things. When you learn somebody else is going through it, it gives you more compassion. You're like, oh, like it was enough that someone wrote a book about it. So I'm not alone on this journey. Okay, let's go to Stacy. Stacy is an executive coach, and she's part of our global program, and very active in our FemCity Boca del Rey chapter as well. My question for you, Stacy, and you can expand on what Emila and what Nicole also shared, but how do we keep this going so that we don't fall back into our old ways? Because I feel like, myself included, when I started on my self-love journey, I would get really good. I'm like, yes, I'm rocking and rolling. And then something would happen, whether it was a trigger, a person said something, or maybe it was an environment where I walked into it. And then I kind of go back into like my old habits of saying unkind things to myself, kind of going back into reversing my efforts in self-love. What would you say to those that are looking to say, like, see how they can just not fall back all the time?
Yeah. So I guess before I answer that, a share is, I went to a women's empowerment conference at the time. Actually, it was January of 2020. So right before we knew about COVID and the shutdown and all of that stuff. And it was about 4,000 women at this conference. And we were sort of in a stadium setting, real jam-packed. And one of the questions that was asked, we were all asked to stand up, and then they went through a series of questions. And the intent was to show all of us how much we had in common, even though we were obviously from different places, ages, races, all of that good stuff. And they said, if you resonate with a question, sit down. And she asked the question, it was a statement really, I hate myself, specifically my body. And no one sat down in that room full of, all of these amazing women. And what was even more surprising, if you will, was she kind of asked, because there were some teenagers in the group. The youngest person in the audience was 11, and the oldest was 85, and her granddaughter had brought her to the conference. And so to imagine in a room with that level of, everything, that all of them had that amount of self-hate, it really stayed with me. It stays with me even till today. And it's something I always think back to, especially when I'm dealing with people and coaching people. So that's thing one. And then thing two is there is something I do in my coaching practice. So I coach executive women who are specifically sandwiched between taking care of their young kids, but also their aging and ailing parents. And one of the things I ask them to do is to take stock of what they do throughout the week. And I always say actions speak louder than words. And to me, it's really easy for us to kind of negate what we're saying, but it's very hard to negate our actions. For example, if you go for the whole day and you didn't drink a glass of water, if you go for this is your 7th meeting, you didn't go to the bathroom, yet you wanted to go at meeting 2. Right? If you were supposed to go to bed and maybe get 6-7 hours sleep and you dragged yourself to bed at midnight and then woke up at 4 a.m., like these are indicators that you are really being harmful to yourself. So I would say the first thing is take a look at what you're actually doing. And then the thing I ask people to do, and I do myself to kind of reality check myself, is I ask people, women, get very specific, mamas, business owners, executives, grandmas, whatever. I ask them to assume guardianship of themselves for 30 days. Because we treat people and clients and our kids and our families way better than we treat ourselves. And so when I ask you to assume guardianship of yourself, as a guardian, think about what that embodies. Kindness, love, understanding, patience, all of these beautiful, beautiful things. And so when you assume that persona over yourself, you're more likely to drink water. You're more likely to eat your meals on time. You're more likely to respect when somebody's in your space and probably very toxic and like what you need to say to them. So I really, really, it's such a fantastic, because we will do for others what we will not do for ourselves. We will show up to the gym for a friend instead of showing up for ourselves. And so I think that how do we not fall back into our old ways? Assume guardianship over yourself. Take stock of like what it is exactly that you're doing that harms you. And the other thing that I did, I went to a retreat a couple of years ago when I turned 40. 40 for me was like, oh my God. And they said, write everything that you say in your head about yourself. Let me tell you, dudes, when I got to like page 4, and it was a big legal pad. It was like no little, baby notebook. It was page 4. I ripped all the pages off and I crumpled them up and I threw them on the ground. And I was like, if somebody spoke to anybody that I loved this way, they would not be in our lives. 100% not have access to my children, my husband, whomever. And so really, if you are speaking to yourself that way, and we all do it, this isn't me sitting here saying, oh, I'm cured. But, you got to do a reality check and figure it out.
Yeah. Wow. The action one, I've never heard that before, Stacey. I have to say, like, I'm thinking, as we hear all of what you all are sharing, I think it's human nature to like apply it back to your life and your story and like how, seeing yourself in that. And I have to say, listening to you, I was thinking about my most darkest non-self-love days, like the bottom of the barrel. I was at my highest level of like eating disorders for sure. I would spend days not eating. I'd spend hours running. Sleep? What's sleep? I mean, I had never even thought of the actions that we're taking on that illustrate the lack of self-love that we have for ourselves.
Yeah.
This has been really an incredible conversation. Thank you so much. The three of you, thank you so much. I have chills all over. I started getting chills as soon as Emma started talking. I was like, woo, I have chills. And you see one of our femmes also added goosebumps. So wow, fantastic. All right, so final advice, Emma, and how can femmes find you to learn more about the work you're doing in this world?
Sure. My final advice actually relates to just what Stacy was talking about, because what's underneath what she was talking about is being connected to our feelings and the needs we have that arise from those feelings. So that's what drives our behavior, how we feel, what our needs are, or you could say values if you don't want to use the word needs. So one of the practices that I learned a couple of decades ago now was nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg. It's a way of identifying our feelings, our needs, and then making a request of ourselves or others to help ourselves meet those needs or values. And it's a practice. It's absolutely a practice. It's a practice of honesty, self-honesty, microscopic honesty about what's going on for us. And it's a practice of empathy, having empathy and compassion for ourselves. And I love one of my favorite books. I'm actually going to share it. It's called What We Say Matters, and practicing nonviolent communication. And this is not Marshall's book. It's by Judith and Ike Lassiter. But what we say matters a lot to ourselves and to others. And what we say to others matters. So for me, the practice is identifying what's going on for me, what's alive for me underneath this behavior, and can I identify what need I'm trying to meet. And I'm in the middle of writing a memoir, and what I'm noticing is that the behaviors I have were there 25 years ago. Right? They were in their seed form 25 years ago. I discovered where they came from, what feelings and needs were not met for me when I was a child, and started those ways we talk to ourselves. Right? And I still work with them today. I'm working with them at a different level of the spiral, a different level of awareness, with more compassion, presence, care, empathy, and different language, because I learned how to talk to those different parts of myself, like Nicole pointed out, right? I learned how to talk to them with care in the way I would want someone else to talk to me. And so my life is completely different. But I do think there's an arc of it for us. They never completely go away. We just learn how to engage with ourselves differently, right? So that's my last piece of advice. Get to know yourself, know your feelings, know your needs, know how you want to assume guardianship of yourself, how you would take care of yourself, and how to talk to yourself in a way that we may not have learned to do as we were kids. And that will crack open our businesses. It certainly has cracked open mine and my success in the world. So I'm an intuitive life coach. I help highly sensitive people, empath seekers, introverts. I help them navigate career, relationship, and life transitions. So I offer intuitive readings, energy healing. I'm a pet psychic and life coaching. And I blend it all together because we are whole people. And so I just love this work. And I think you told me where they can find me.
Yeah. What's your website?
My website is emilah.com, EMILAH.com. And I also have a free Facebook group called the Dragonfly Den with Emilah. And you can join that and get and sign up for my newsletter, get a free 30-minute visit with me to talk about what's alive for you and how we can support each other. So yeah, that's me. I'm in Tucson, Arizona. So if you happen to be in Tucson, let's have coffee.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nicole, your final advice on ways that femmes can find you to learn more about the work you're doing in this world?
Yes, I always go back and forth because if you've heard me on here before, one of my main go-tos are just really set some reminders on your calendar because I want to make it easy for people. Set some cool reminders like you're awesome, drink some water, breathe on your calendar just a few times a day randomly. So you know it's on automatic now. But even though you would start to ignore it a little bit, every time it pops up, it's like, all right, you are awesome. What you're doing matters. But in addition to that, the one thing that everyone can do, really look at yourself in the mirror. And I say this because I recognize, maybe it's just me, when I am in moments of just like high stress, self talk is kind of funky, the voices are like all over the place. I can walk out the house like, I never actually looked in the mirror. I never took the time to look at myself. And so, one thing we can do, like to help the words, actually slow down and look at yourself in the mirror without being critical. Just look at yourself and like, not too bad. Look at you. The fro is looking moisturized today. Just look at what your outfit like. Okay, that fits right. Because so often we're just like, is everything okay? Or if you even look at the mirror. So just slow down a little bit and give yourself a good look over to hype your own self up.
I love that. I love that, Nicole.
And one way that people can follow me right now, so I'm a therapist coach. My main thing is I help women, especially mothers, remember who they are to get connected with themselves. And we do a lot of self-talk like we're doing today. This month for February, I am doing a series on self-compassion. This is the time to follow my Instagram if you have never. This is probably going to be the most consistent I have ever been on social media. I am posting every day. And knock on wood, I have not missed a day yet. I'm posting every day a quote, a journal prompt, an action step, and an affirmation on self-compassion.
Love
so get your daily dose of self-compassion by following me on Instagram and Facebook. Thriving with Baby Chicago is on Instagram, and just Thriving with Baby on Facebook.
I love that.
And just follow it for the rest of the month, because who knows what the next month's going to bring.
Oh my God. That was so great. And Nicole has the best laugh. I was so lucky that she attended our FemCity global retreat last year. I got a chance to hear her laugh in real life, and it is just so healing. It's just so healing. I love it. All right, Stacey, your final advice and how can
All right. So I think my final advice is to build on, my teammates here. There are 3 people that we always meet on our journey. There's somebody that is, 2 chapters or a mile ahead of you. There's somebody that's walking the same path as you that you can sit with and be like, man, I can't even with this. And then there's somebody that's just a little bit behind you that you can help lead or coach or train or mentor. Because it keeps you grounded in terms of where you are with the process. Because a lot of times we're in it and we can't see above ourselves or side to side or below. It's just, I am in the thick of it. And I can't get out of it. I can't get out of my own head. And so I think if you have those 3 perspectives, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical human, right? You've got books, you've got podcasts, you've got Violet, you've got us, whoever. Like, one of the things I did was partner with a femme who's actually quit her job also, and Julie Allison, and is starting. And so her and we're going to meet once a month for coffee. And we're just going to talk about our journey, because we quit our jobs around the same time to really pursue our coaching practices full time. And we had such a pity party for the first half of breakfast a week and a half ago. And then we got into the zone of planning and then strategizing. And then we had to rip ourselves away from each other, like towards the end of breakfast. And so I'm just saying that to say, these are things that, in addition to everything talked about here, can really help you on your journey. And yeah, it makes a difference. How can you find me? I am at Evolution Executive Coaching, and you can find me on Instagram. And like Nicole, I'm trying to be more consistent there. I posted the most hilarious reel today, but you got to go see it. I'm not going to tell you about it. I am on Evolution Executive Coaching. That is also my website. And then on LinkedIn, I play quite a bit on there. You can find me just by my name, Stacey Luces. And most exciting is I've got an anthology I'm a co-author in. It's called We Rise in Power, Amplifying Women of Color and Her Voices for Change. That is going to drop March 8th on International Women's Day. I finally read it last week, and it did what a book is supposed to do. I cried, I laughed, I got really angry at certain parts of it, because it is about women of color and our experiences, both here and in Canada. There are a couple of femmes on there. But what I loved about it is that represented to me what I just talked about. I saw people that I could help. I saw people that I had so much in common with, and I immediately wanted to be their friend. And I had people that were so far ahead of me, maybe a decade ahead of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to know how you did X, Y, Z. And so I feel like that there's power in sort of sharing our experiences. And a lot of it had to do with, imposter syndrome, unconscious bias, like all of the things. But I think that from a growth perspective, as long as you're growing, you're being kind and showing yourself self-love.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This was amazing. And lots of love that came through in the chat. Thank you, Amala and Nicole and Stacey, for joining us today. And for those that are watching the replay, feel free to reach out to any of us and share your aha moments or your successes. We'd love to cheer you on. And for those that have never heard of FemCity, you can head over to femcity.com and try out our 30-day free trial membership ready for you. Wishing you a great rest of the week. See you next week. Bye.
Thanks, guys.